dragons into the watchdogs of the gods. There must always remain, however, from the standpoint of normal waking consciousness, a certain baffling inconsistency between the wisdom brought forth from the deep, and the prudence usually found to be effective in the light world. Hence the common divorce of opportunism from virtue and the resultant degeneration of human existence. Martyrdom is for saints, but the common people have their institutions, and these cannot be left to grow like lilies of the field. Peter keeps drawing his sword, as in the garden, to defend the creator and sustainer of the world. 20. The boon brought from the transcendent deep becomes quickly rationalized into nonentity, and the need becomes great for another hero to refresh the word. How teach again, however, what has been taught correctly and incorrectly learned 1,000 times, throughout the millennia of mankind's prudent folly? That is the hero's ultimate difficult task. How render back into light world language the speech-defying pronouncements of the dark? How represent on a two-dimensional surface a three-dimensional form, or in a three-dimensional image a multi-dimensional meaning? How translate into terms of yes and no revelations that shatter into meaninglessness every attempt to define the pairs of opposites? How communicate to people who insist on the exclusive evidence of their senses the message of the all-generating void? Many failures attest to the difficulties of this life-affirmative threshold. The first problem of the returning hero is to accept as real, after an experience of the soul-satisfying vision of fulfillment, the passing joys and sorrows, banalities and noisy obscenities of life. Why re-enter such a world? Why attempt to make plausible, or even interesting, to men and women consumed with passion, the experience of transcendental bliss? As dreams that were momentous by night may seem simply silly in the light of day, so the poet and the prophet can discover themselves playing the idiot before a jury of sober eyes. The easy thing is to commit the whole community to the devil and retire again into the heavenly rock dwelling, close the door, and make it fast. But if some spiritual obstetrician has meanwhile drawn the Shimenawa across the retreat, then the work of representing eternity in time, and perceiving in time eternity, cannot be avoided. The story of Rip Van Winkle is an example of the delicate case of the returning hero. Rip moved into the adventurous realm unconsciously, as we all do every night when we go to sleep. In deep sleep, declare the Hindus, the self is unified and blissful. Therefore deep sleep is called the cognitional state. 21. But though we are refreshed and sustained by these nightly visits to the source darkness, our lives are not reformed by them. We return, like Rip, with nothing to show for the experience but our whiskers. He looked round for his gun, but in place of the clean, well-oiled fowling piece, he found an old firelock lying by him, the barrel encrusted with rust, the lock falling off, and the stockworm eaten. As he rose to walk, he found himself stiff in the joints, and wanting his usual activity. As he approached the village, he met a number of people, but none whom he knew, which somewhat surprised him, for he had thought himself acquainted with every one in the country round. Their dress, too, was of a different fashion from that to which he was accustomed. They all stared at him with equal marks of surprise, and, whenever they cast their eyes upon him, invariably stroked their chins. The constant recurrence of this gesture induced Rip involuntarily to do the same, when, to his astonishment, he found his beard had grown a foot long. He began to doubt whether both he and the world around him were not bewitched. The appearance of Rip, with his long, grizzled beard, his rusty fowling piece, his uncouth dress, and the army of women and children that had gathered at his heels, soon attracted the attention of the tavern politicians. They crowded round him, eyeing him from head to foot with great curiosity. The orator bustled up to him, and, drawing him partly aside, inquired on which side he voted. Rip stared in vacant stupidity. Another short but busy little fellow pulled him by the arm, and, rising on tiptoe, inquired in his ear whether he was a Federal or a Democrat. Rip was equally at a loss to comprehend the question, when a knowing, self-important old gentleman in a sharp-cocked hat made his way through the crowd, putting them to the right and left with his elbows as he passed, and, planting himself before Van Winkle, with one arm akimbo, the other resting on his cane, his keen eyes and sharp hat penetrating, as it were, into his very soul, demanded in an austere tone what brought him to the election with a gun on his shoulder and a mob at his heels, and whether he meant to breed a riot in the village. "Alas, gentlemen," cried Rip, somewhat dismayed, "I am a poor, quiet man, a native of the place, and a loyal subject to the king, God bless him." Here a general shout burst from the bystanders. "A Tory, a Tory! A spy, a refugee, hustle him, away with him." It was with great difficulty that the self-important man in the cocked hat restored order. 22. More dispiriting than the fate of Rip is the account of what happened to the Irish hero Oisin when he returned from a long sojourn with the daughter of the king of the land of youth. Oisin had done better than poor Rip. He had kept his eyes open in the adventurous realm. He had descended consciously, awake, into the kingdom of the unconscious, deep sleep, and had incorporated the values of the subliminal experience into his waking personality. A transmutation had been effected. But precisely because of this highly desirable circumstance, the dangers of his return were the greater. Since his entire personality had been brought into accord with the powers and forms of timelessness, all of him stood to be refuted, blasted, by the impact of the forms and powers of time. Oisin, the son of Finn MacCool, one day was out hunting with his men in the woods of Erin, when he was approached by the daughter of the king of the land of youth. Oisin's men had gone ahead with the day's kill, leaving their master with his 3 dogs to shift for himself. And the mysterious being had appeared to him with the beautiful body of a woman, but the head of a pig. She declared that the head was due to a druidic spell, promising that it would vanish the very minute he would marry her. "Well, if that is the state you are in," said he, "and if marriage with me will free you from the spell, I'll not leave the pig's head on you long." Without delay the pig's head was dispatched and they set out together for Tir Na Anog, the land of youth. Asheen dwelt there as a king many happy years. But one day he turned and declared to his supernatural bride, "I wish I could be in Erin today to see my father and his men." "If you go," said his wife, "and set foot on the land of Erin, you'll never come back here to me, and you'll become a blind old man." "How long do you think it is since you came here?" "About 3 years," said Asheen. "It is 300 years," said she, "since you came to this kingdom with me. If you must go to Erin, I'll give you this white steed to carry you, but if you come down from the steed or touch the soil of Erin with your foot, the steed will come back that minute, and you'll be where he left you, a poor old man." "I'll come back, never fear," said Asheen. "Have I not good reason to come back? But I must see my father and my son and my friends in Erin once more. I must have even one look at them." She prepared the steed for Asheen and said, "This steed will carry you wherever you wish to go." Asheen never stopped till the steed touched the soil of Erin, and he went on till he came to Knockpatrick in Munster, where he saw a man herding cows. In the field where the cows were grazing there was a broad flat stone. "Will you come here," said Asheen to the herdsman, "and turn over this stone?" "Indeed, then, I will not," said the herdsman, "for I could not lift it, nor 20 men more like me." The Fenians were the men of Finn MacCool, giants all. Asheen, who was the son of Finn MacCool, had been one of their number. But their day now had long passed, and the inhabitants of the land were no longer the great ones of old. Such legends of archaic giants are common to folk traditions everywhere. See, for instance, the myth recounted above, pp. 167 to 169, of King Muchukunda. Comparable are the protracted lives of the Hebrew patriarchs. Adam lived 930 years, Seth 912, Enos 905, etc., etc., 23. Asheen rode up to the stone, and, reaching down, caught it with his hand and turned it over. Underneath the stone was the great horn of the Fenians, Borabu, which circled round like a seashell, and it was the rule that when any of the Fenians of Erin blew the Borabu, the others would assemble at once from whatever part of the country they might be in at the time. "Will you bring this horn to me?" asked Asheen of the herdsman. "I will not," said the herdsman, "for neither I nor many more like me could raise it from the ground." With that Asheen moved near the horn, and reaching down took it in his hand, but so eager was he to blow it, that he forgot everything, and slipped in reaching till one foot touched the earth. In an instant the steed was gone, and Asheen lay on the ground a blind old man. 24. The equating of a single year in paradise to 100 of earthly existence is a motif well known to myth. The full round of 100 signifies totality. Similarly, the 360 degrees of the circle signify totality. Accordingly, the Hindu Puranas represent 1 year of the gods as equal to 360 of men. From the standpoint of the Olympians, eon after eon of earthly history rolls by, revealing ever the harmonious form of the total round, so that where men see only change and death, the blessed behold immutable form, world without end. But now the problem is to maintain this cosmic standpoint in the face of an immediate earthly pain or joy. The taste of the fruits of temporal knowledge draws the concentration of the spirit away from the center of the eon to the peripheral crisis of the moment. The balance of perfection is lost, the spirit falters, and the hero falls. The idea of the insulating horse, to keep the hero out of immediate touch with the earth and yet permit him to promenade among the peoples of the world, is a vivid example of the basic precaution taken generally by the carriers of supernormal power. Montezuma, Emperor of Mexico, never set foot on the ground. He was always carried on the shoulders of noblemen, and if he lighted anywhere they laid a rich tapestry for him to walk upon. Within his palace, the king of Persia walked on carpets on which no one else might tread. Outside of it he was never seen on foot but only in a chariot or on horseback. Formerly neither the kings of Uganda, nor their mothers, nor their queens might walk on foot outside of the spacious enclosures in which they lived. Whenever they went forth they were carried on the shoulders of men of the Buffalo clan, several of whom accompanied any of these royal personages on a journey and took it in turn to bear the burden. The king sat astride the bearer's neck with a leg over each shoulder and his feet tucked under the bearer's arms. When one of these royal carriers grew tired, he shot the king onto the shoulders of a second man without allowing the royal feet to touch the ground. 25. Sir James George Fraser explains in the following graphic way the fact that over the whole earth the divine personage may not touch the ground with his foot. Apparently holiness, magical virtue, taboo, or whatever we may call that mysterious quality which is supposed to pervade sacred or tabooed persons, is conceived by the primitive philosopher as a physical substance or fluid, with which the sacred man is charged just as a Leyden jar is charged with electricity, and exactly as the electricity in the jar can be discharged by contact with a good conductor, so the holiness or magical virtue in the man can be discharged and drained away by contact with the earth, which on this theory serves as an excellent conductor for the magical fluid. Hence, in order to preserve the charge from running to waste, the sacred or tabooed personage must be carefully prevented from touching the ground. In electrical language he must be insulated, if he is not to be emptied of the precious substance or fluid with which he, as a vial, is filled to the brim. And in many cases apparently the insulation of a tabooed person is recommended as a precaution not merely for his own sake but for the sake of others. For since the virtue of holiness is, so to say, a powerful explosive which the smallest touch may detonate, it is necessary in the interest of the general safety to keep it within narrow bounds, lest breaking out it should blast, blight, and destroy whatever it comes into contact with. 26. There is, no doubt, a psychological justification for the precaution. The Englishman dressing for dinner in the jungles of Nigeria feels that there is reason in his act. The young artist wearing his whiskers into the lobby of the Ritz will be glad to explain his idiosyncrasy. The Roman collar sets apart the man of the pulpit. A 20th century nun floats by in a costume from the Middle Ages. The wife is insulated, more or less, by her ring. The tales of W. Somerset Maugham describe the metamorphoses that overcome the bearers of the white man's burden who neglect the taboo of the dinner jacket. Many folk songs give testimony to the dangers of the broken ring. And the myths, for example, the myths assembled by Ovid in his great compendium, the Metamorphoses, recount again and again the shocking transformations that take place when the insulation between a highly concentrated power center and the lower power field of the surrounding world is, without proper precautions, suddenly taken away. According to the fairy lore of the Celts and Germans, a gnome or elf caught abroad by the sunrise is turned immediately into a stick or a stone. The returning hero, to complete his adventure, must survive the impact of the world. Rip Van Winkle never knew what he had experienced, his return was a joke. Asheen knew, but he lost his centering in it and so collapsed. Kamar al-Zaman had the best luck of all. He experienced awake the bliss of deep sleep, and returned to the light of day with such a convincing talisman of his unbelievable adventure that he was able to retain his self-assurance in the face of every sobering disillusionment. While he was sleeping in his tower, the two jinn, Danash and Maimuna, transported from distant China the daughter of the Lord of the Islands and the Seas and the Seven Palaces. Her name was the Princess Budur, and they placed this young woman asleep beside the Persian prince, in the very bed. The jinn uncovered the two faces, and perceived that the couple were as like as twins. By Allah, declared Danash, O my lady, my beloved is the fairer. But Maimuna, the female spirit, who loved Kamar al-Zaman, retorted, Not so, the fairer one is mine. Whereupon they wrangled, challenging and counter-challenging, until Danash at last suggested they should seek an impartial judge. Maimuna smote the ground with her foot, and there came out of it an Ifrit blind in one eye, humpbacked, scurvy-skinned, with eye orbits slit up and down his face, and on his head were 7 horns. 4 locks of hair fell to his heels. His hands were like pitchforks and his legs like masts. And he had nails like the claws of a lion, feet like the hoofs of the wild ass. The monster respectfully kissed the ground before Maimuna and inquired what she would have him do. Instructed that he was to judge between the 2 young persons lying on the bed, each with an arm under the other's neck, he gazed long upon them, marveling at their loveliness, then turned to Maimuna and Danash and declared his verdict. By Allah, if you will have the truth, he said, the 2 are of equal beauty. Nor can I make any choice between them, on account of there being a man and a woman. But I have another thought, which is that we wake each of them in turn, without the knowledge of the other, and whichever is the more enamored shall be judged inferior in comeliness. It was agreed. Danash changed himself to the form of a flea and bit Kamar al-Zaman on the neck. Starting from sleep, the youth rubbed the bitten part, scratching it hard because of the smart, and meanwhile turned a little to the side. He found lying beside him something whose breath was sweeter than musk and whose skin softer than cream. He marveled. He sat up. He looked better at what was beside him and discerned that it was a young woman like a pearl or shining sun, like a dome seen from afar on a well-built wall. Kamar al-Zaman attempted to wake her, but Danash had deepened her slumber. The youth shook her. O my beloved, awake and look at me, he said. But she never stirred. Kamar al-Zaman imagined Budur to be the woman whom his father wished him to marry, and he was filled with eagerness. But he feared that his sire might be hiding somewhere in the room, watching, so he restrained himself and contented himself with taking the seal ring from her little finger and slipping it on his own. The Ifrits then returned him to his sleep. In contrast with the performance of Kamar al-Zaman was that of Budur. She had no thought or fear of anyone watching. Furthermore, Maimuna, who had awakened her, with female malice had gone high up her leg and bitten hard in a place that burned. The beautiful, noble, glorious Budur, discovering her male affinity beside her, and perceiving that he had already taken her ring, unable either to rouse him or to imagine what he had done to her, and ravaged with love, assailed by the open presence of his flesh, lost all control, and attained to a climax of helpless passion. Lust was sore upon her, for that the desire of women is fiercer than the desire of men, and she was ashamed of her own shamelessness. Then she plucked his seal ring from his finger, and put it on her own instead of the ring he had taken, and bussed his inner lips and hands, nor did she leave any part of him unkissed. After which she took him to her breast and embraced him, and, laying one of her hands under his neck and the other under his armpit, nestled close to him and fell asleep at his side. Danash therefore lost the argument. Budur was returned to China. Next morning, when the 2 young people awoke with the whole of Asia now between them, they turned to right and to left, but discovered no one at their side. They cried out to their respective households, belabored and slew people round about, and went entirely mad. Kamar al-Zaman lay down to languish. His father, the king, sat down at his head, weeping and mourning over him, and never leaving him, night or day. But the Princess Buder had to be manacled. With a chain of iron about her neck, she was made fast to one of her palace windows. 27. The encounter and separation, for all its wildness, is typical of the sufferings of love. For when a heart insists on its destiny, resisting the general blandishment, then the agony is great, so too the danger. Forces, however, will have been set in motion beyond the reckoning of the senses. Sequences of events from the corners of the world will draw gradually together, and miracles of coincidence bring the inevitable to pass. The talismanic ring from the soul's encounter with its other portion in the place of recollectedness betokens that the heart was there aware of what Rip Van Winkle missed. It betokens too a conviction of the waking mind that the reality of the deep is not belied by that of common day. This is the sign of the hero's requirement, now, to knit together his two worlds. The remainder of the long story of Kamar al-Zaman is a history of the slow yet wonderful operation of a destiny that has been summoned into life. Not everyone has a destiny. Only the hero who has plunged to touch it and has come up again, with a ring. 5. Master of the two worlds. Freedom to pass back and forth across the world division, from the perspective of the apparitions of time to that of the causal deep and back, not contaminating the principles of the one with those of the other, yet permitting the mind to know the one by virtue of the other, is the talent of the master. The cosmic dancer, declares Nietzsche, does not rest heavily in a single spot, but gaily, lightly, turns and leaps from one position to another. It is possible to speak from only one point at a time, but that does not invalidate the insights of the rest. The myths do not often display in a single image the mystery of the ready transit. Where they do, the moment is a precious symbol, full of import, to be treasured and contemplated. Such a moment was that of the transfiguration of the Christ. Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into an high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And, behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias talking with him. Then answered Peter, and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias. While he yet spoke, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face, and were sore afraid. And Jesus came and touched them, and said, Arise, and be not afraid. And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no man, save Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, saying, Tell the vision to no man, until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. 28. Here is the whole myth in a moment. Jesus the guide, the way, the vision, and the companion of the return. The disciples are his initiates, not themselves masters of the mystery, yet introduced to the full experience of the paradox of the two worlds in one. Peter was so frightened he babbled. 29. Flesh had dissolved before their eyes to reveal the word. They fell upon their faces, and when they arose the door again had closed. It should be observed that this eternal moment soars beyond Kamar al-Zaman's romantic realization of his individual destiny. Not only do we have here a masterly passage, back and forth, across the world threshold, but we observe a profounder, very much profounder, penetration of the depths. Individual destiny is not the motive and theme of this vision, for the revelation was beheld by 3 witnesses, not one. It cannot be satisfactorily elucidated simply in psychological terms. Of course, it may be dismissed. We may doubt whether such a scene ever actually took place. But that would not help us any, for we are concerned, at present, with problems of symbolism, not of historicity. We do not particularly care whether Rip Van Winkle, Kamar al-Zaman, or Jesus Christ ever actually lived. Their stories are what concern us, and these stories are so widely distributed over the world, attached to various heroes in various lands, that the question of whether this or that local carrier of the universal theme may or may not have been a historical, living man can be of only secondary moment. The stressing of this historical element will lead to confusion, it will simply obfuscate the picture message. What, then, is the tenor of the image of the Transfiguration? That is the question we have to ask. But in order that it may be confronted on universal grounds, rather than sectarian, we had better review one further example, equally celebrated, of the archetypal event. The following is taken from the Hindu Song of the Lord, the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord, the beautiful youth Krishna, is an incarnation of Vishnu, the universal God. Prince Arjuna is his disciple and friend. Arjuna said, O Lord, if you think me able to behold it, then, O Master of Yogis, reveal to me your immutable self. The Lord said, Behold my forms by the hundreds and the thousands, manifold and divine, various in shape and hue. Behold all the gods and angels. Behold many wonders that no one has ever seen before. Behold here today the whole universe, the moving and the unmoving, and whatever else you may desire to see, all concentrated in my body. But with these eyes of yours you cannot see me. I give you a divine eye, behold, now, my sovereign yoga power. Figure 51. Krishna, blue-skinned, leads Arjuna onto the battlefield. Gouache on Carton, India, 18th century A.D. Having spoken thus, the great Lord of Yoga revealed to Arjuna his supreme form as Vishnu, Lord of the universe. with many faces and eyes, presenting many wondrous sights, bedecked with many celestial ornaments, armed with many divine uplifted weapons, wearing celestial garlands and vestments, anointed with divine perfumes, all wonderful, resplendent, boundless, and with faces on all sides. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst forth at once in the sky, that would be like the splendor of the Mighty One. There in the person of the God of gods, Arjuna beheld the whole universe, with its manifold divisions, all gathered together in one. Then, overcome with wonder, his hair standing on end, Arjuna bowed his head to the Lord, joined his palms in salutation, and addressed him. In thy body, O Lord, I behold all the gods and all the diverse hosts of beings, the Lord Brahma, seated on the lotus, all the patriarchs and the celestial serpents. I behold thee with myriads of arms and bellies, with myriads of faces and eyes. I behold thee, infinite in form, on every side, but I see not thy end nor thy middle nor thy beginning, O Lord of the universe, O universal form. On all sides glowing like a mass of radiance I behold thee, with thy diadem, mace, and discus, blazing everywhere like burning fire in the burning sun, passing all measure and difficult to behold. Thou art the supreme support of the universe. Thou art the undying guardian of the eternal law. Thou art, in my belief, the primal being. This vision was opened to Arjuna on a battlefield, the moment just before the blast of the first trumpet calling to combat. With the god as his charioteer, the great prince had driven out into the field between the two battle-ready peoples. His own armies had been assembled against those of a usurping cousin, but now in the enemy ranks he beheld a multitude of men whom he knew and loved. His spirit failed him. Alas, he said to the divine charioteer, we are resolved to commit a great sin, in that we are ready to slay our kinsmen to satisfy our greed for the pleasure of the kingdom. Far better would it be for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, should slay me in battle, unarmed and unresisting. I will not fight. But thereupon the comely god had summoned him to courage, pouring out to him the wisdom of the Lord, and in the end had opened to him this vision. The prince beholds, dumbfounded, not only his friend transformed into the living personification of the support of the universe, but the heroes of the two armies rushing on a wind into the deity's innumerable, terrible mouths. He exclaims in horror, when I look upon thy blazing form reaching to the skies and shining with many colors, when I see thee with thy mouth opened wide and thy great eyes glowing bright, my inmost soul trembles in fear, and I find neither courage nor peace, O Vishnu. When I behold thy mouths, striking terror with their tusks, like time's all-consuming fire, I am disoriented and find no peace. Be gracious, O Lord of the gods, O abode of the universe. All these sons of Dhritarashtra, together with the hosts of monarchs, and Bhishma, Drona, and Karna, and the warrior chiefs of our side as well, enter precipitately thy tusked and terrible mouths, frightful to behold. Some are seen caught between thy teeth, their heads crushed to powder. As the torrents of many rivers rush toward the ocean, so do the heroes of the mortal world rush into thy fiercely flaming mouths. As moths rush swiftly into a blazing fire to perish there, even so do these creatures swiftly rush into thy mouths to their own destruction. Thou lickest thy lips, devouring all the worlds on every side with thy flaming mouths. Thy fiery rays fill the whole universe with their radiance and scorch it, O Vishnu. Tell me who thou art, that wearest this frightful form. Salutations to thee, O God Supreme. Have mercy. I desire to know thee, who art the primal one, for I do not understand thy purpose. The Lord said, I am mighty, world-destroying time, now engaged here in slaying these men. Even without you, all these warriors standing arrayed in the opposing armies shall not live. Therefore stand up and win glory, conquer your enemies and enjoy an opulent kingdom. By me and none other have they already been slain, be an instrument only, O Arjuna. Kill Drona and Bhishma and Jayadratha and Karna, and the other great warriors as well, who have already been killed by me. Be not distressed by fear. Fight, and you shall conquer your foes in the battle. Having heard these words of Krishna, Arjuna trembled, folded his hands in adoration, and bowed down. Overwhelmed with fear, he saluted Krishna and then addressed him again, with faltering voice. Thou art the first of gods, the ancient soul. Thou art the supreme resting place of the universe. Thou art the knower and that which is to be known and the ultimate goal. And by thee is the world pervaded, O thou of infinite form. Thou art wind and death and fire and moon and the Lord of water. Thou art the first man and the great grandsire. Salutations, salutations to thee. I rejoice that I have seen what was never seen before, but my mind is also troubled with fear. Show me that other form of thine. Be gracious, O Lord of gods, O abode of the universe. I would see thee as before, with thy crown and thy mace and the discus in thy hand. Assume again thy four-armed shape, O thou of 1,000 arms and of endless shapes. The Lord said, by my grace, through my own yoga power, O Arjuna, I have shown you this supreme form, resplendent, universal, infinite, and primeval, which none but you has ever seen. Be not afraid, be not bewildered, on seeing this terrific form of mine. Free from fear and glad at heart, behold again my other form. Having thus addressed Arjuna, Krishna assumed a graceful shape again and comforted the terrified Pandava. 30. The disciple has been blessed with a vision transcending the scope of normal human destiny, and amounting to a glimpse of the essential nature of the cosmos. Not his personal fate, but the fate of mankind, of life as a whole, the atom and all the solar systems, has been opened to him. And this in terms befitting his human understanding. That is to say, in terms of an anthropomorphic vision. The cosmic man. Figure 52. The cosmic lion goddess, holding the sun, single-leaf manuscript, India, 18th century A.D. An identical initiation might have been effected by means of the equally valid image of the cosmic horse, the cosmic eagle, the cosmic tree, or the cosmic praying mantis. Om. The head of the sacrificial horse is the dawn, its eye the sun, its vital force the air, its open mouth the fire called Vaishvanara, and the body of the sacrificial horse is the ear. Its back is heaven, its belly the sky, its hoof the earth, its sides the four quarters, its ribs the intermediate quarters, its members the seasons, its joints the months and fortnights, its feet the days and nights, its bones the stars and its flesh the clouds. Its half-digested food is the sand, its blood vessels the rivers, its liver and spleen the mountains, its hairs the herbs and trees. Its forepart is the ascending sun, its hind part the descending sun, its yawning is lightning, its shaking the body is thundering, its urinating is raining, and its neighing is voice. 31. The archetype. Body of life a beaked carnivorous desire. Self upheld on storm-broad wings, but the eyes were spouts of blood, the eyes were gashed out, dark blood ran from the ruinous eye pits to the hook of the beak, and rained on the waste spaces of empty heaven. Yet the great life continued, yet the great life was beautiful, and she drank her defeat, and devoured her famine for food. 32. The cosmic tree is a well-known mythological figure, viz. Yggdrasil, the world ash, of the Eddas. The mantis plays a major role in the mythology of the Bushmen of South Africa. Furthermore, the revelation recorded in the Song of the Lord was made in terms befitting Arjuna's caste and race. The cosmic man whom he beheld was an aristocrat, like himself, and a Hindu. Correspondingly, in Palestine the cosmic man appeared as a Jew, in ancient Germany as a German, among the Basuto he is a Negro, in Japan Japanese. The race and stature of the figure symbolizing the immanent and transcendent universal is of historical, not semantic, moment. So also the sex. The cosmic woman, who appears in the iconography of the Jains, asterisk is as eloquent a symbol as the cosmic man. Symbols are only the vehicles of communication. They must not be mistaken for the final term, the tenor, of their reference. No matter how attractive or impressive they may seem, they remain but convenient means, accommodated to the understanding. Hence the personality or personalities of God, whether represented in Trinitarian, dualistic, or Unitarian terms, in polytheistic, monotheistic, or henotheistic terms, pictorially or verbally, as documented fact or as apocalyptic vision, no one should attempt to read or interpret as the final thing. The problem of the theologian is to keep his symbol translucent, so that it may not block out the very light it is supposed to convey. For then alone do we know God truly, writes St. Thomas Aquinas, when we believe that he is far above all that man can possibly think of God. 33. And in the Kena Upanishad, in the same spirit, to know is not to know is to know. 34. Mistaking a vehicle for its tenor may lead to the spilling not only of valueless ink, but of valuable blood. The next thing to observe is that the transfiguration of Jesus was witnessed by devotees who had extinguished their personal wills, men who had long since liquidated life, personal fate, destiny, by complete self-abnegation in the Master. Neither by the Vedas, nor by penances, nor by almsgiving, nor yet by sacrifice, am I to be seen in the form in which you have just now beheld me, Krishna declared, after he had resumed his familiar shape. But only by devotion to me may I be known in this form, realized truly, and entered into. He who does my work and regards me as the supreme goal, who is devoted to me and without hatred for any creature, he comes to me. 35. A corresponding formulation by Jesus makes the point more succinctly. Whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. 36. The meaning is very clear. It is the meaning of all religious practice. The individual, through prolonged psychological disciplines, gives up completely all attachment to his personal limitations, idiosyncrasies, hopes and fears, no longer resists the self-annihilation that is prerequisite to rebirth in the realization of truth, and so becomes ripe, at last, for the great at one meant. His personal ambitions being totally dissolved, he no longer tries to live but willingly relaxes to whatever may come to pass in him. He becomes, that is to say, an anonymity. The law lives in him with his unreserved consent. Figure 53. The Cosmic Woman of the Jains, gouache on cloth, India, 18th century A.D. Many are the figures, particularly in the social and mythological contexts of the Orient, who represent this ultimate state of anonymous presence. The sages of the hermit groves and the wandering mendicants who play a conspicuous role in the life and legends of the East. In myth such figures as the wandering Jew, despised, unknown, yet with the pearl of great price in his pocket, the tatterdemalion beggar, set upon by dogs, the miraculous mendicant bard whose music stills the heart, or the masquerading god, Zeus, Woden, Viracocha, Edshu. These are examples. Sometimes a fool, sometimes a sage, sometimes possessed of regal splendor, sometimes wandering, sometimes as motionless as a python, sometimes wearing a benignant expression, sometimes honored, sometimes insulted, sometimes unknown. Thus lives the man of realization, ever happy with supreme bliss. Just as an actor is always a man, whether he puts on the costume of his role or lays it aside, so is the perfect knower of the imperishable always the imperishable, and nothing else. 37. 6. Freedom to live. What, now, is the result of the miraculous passage and return? The battlefield is symbolic of the field of life, where every creature lives on the death of another. A realization of the inevitable guilt of life may so sicken the heart that, like Hamlet or like Arjuna, one may refuse to go on with it. On the other hand, like most of the rest of us, one may invent a false, finally unjustified, image of oneself as an exceptional phenomenon in the world, not guilty as others are, but justified in one's inevitable sinning because one represents the good. Such self-righteousness leads to a misunderstanding, not only of oneself but of the nature of both man and the cosmos. The goal of the myth is to dispel the need for such life ignorance by effecting a reconciliation of the individual consciousness with the universal will. And this is effected through a realization of the true relationship of the passing phenomena of time to the imperishable life that lives and dies in all. Even as a person casts off worn-out clothes and puts on others that are new, so the embodied self casts off worn-out bodies and enters into others that are new. Weapons cut it not, fire burns it not, water wets it not, the wind does not wither it. This self cannot be cut nor burned nor wetted nor withered. Eternal, all-pervading, unchanging, immovable, the self is the same forever. 38. Man in the world of action loses his centering in the principle of eternity if he is anxious for the outcome of his deeds, but resting them in their fruits on the knees of the living God he is released by them, as by a sacrifice, from the bondages of the sea of death. Do without attachment the work you have to do, surrendering all action to me, with mind intent on the self, freeing yourself from longing and selfishness, fight, unperturbed by grief. 39. Powerful in this insight, calm and free in action, elated that through his hand should flow the grace of Viracocha, the hero is the conscious vehicle of the terrible, wonderful law, whether his work be that of butcher, jockey, or king. Guan Bok, who, having tasted 3 drops from the poison kettle of inspiration, was eaten by the hag Caradwin, reborn as an infant, and committed to the sea, was found next morning in a fish trap by a hapless and sorely disappointed young man named Elphin, son of the wealthy landholder Guidno, whose horses had been killed by the flood of the burst kettle's poison. When the men took up the leathern bag out of the trap and opened it and saw the forehead of the baby boy, they said to Elphin, "Behold a radiant brow, Taliesin." "Taliesin be he called," said Elphin. And he lifted the boy in his arms, and, lamenting his mischance, he placed him sorrowfully behind him. And he made his horse amble gently that before had been trotting, and he carried him as softly as if he had been sitting on the easiest chair in the world. And presently the boy recited aloud a poem in consolation and praise of Elphin, and foretold to him honor and glory. "Fair Elphin, cease to lament. Let no one be dissatisfied with his own. To despair will bring no advantage. No man sees what supports him. Weak and small as I am. On the foaming beach of the ocean. In the day of trouble I shall be of more service to thee than 300 salmon." When Elphin returned to his father's castle, Guidno asked him if he had had a good haul at the weir, and he told him that he had got that which was better than fish. "What was that?" said Guidno. "A bard," answered Elphin. Then said Guidno, "Alas, what will he profit thee?" And the infant himself replied and said, "He will profit him more than the weir ever profited thee." Asked Guidno, "Art thou able to speak, and thou so little?" And the infant answered him, "I am better able to speak than thou to question me." "Let me hear what thou canst say," quoth Guidno. Then Taliesin sang a philosophical song. Now the king one day held court, and Taliesin placed himself in a quiet corner. And so when the bards and the heralds came to cry largesse, and to proclaim the power of the king and his strength, at the moment that they passed by the corner wherein he was crouching, Taliesin pouted out his lips after them, and played Blarum, Blarum, with his finger upon his lips. Neither took they much notice of him as they went by, but proceeded forward till they came before the king, unto whom they made their obeisance with their bodies, as they were wont, without speaking a single word, but pouting out their lips, and making mouths at the king, playing Blarum, Blarum, upon their lips with their fingers, as they had seen the boy do elsewhere. This sight caused the king to wonder and to deem within himself that they were drunk with many liquors. Wherefore he commanded one of his lords, who served at the board, to go to them and desire them to collect their wits, and to consider where they stood, and what it was fitting for them to do. And the lord did so gladly. But they ceased not from their folly any more than before. Whereupon he sent to them a second time, and a third, desiring them to go forth from the hall. At the last the king ordered one of his squires to give a blow to the chief of them named Hynon Vard. And the squire took a broom and struck him on the head, so that he fell back in his seat. Then he arose and went on his knees, and besought leave of the king's grace to show that this their fault was not through want of knowledge, neither through drunkenness, but by the influence of some spirit that was in the hall. And after this Hynon spoke on this wise: "O honorable king, be it known to your grace, that not from the strength of drink, or of too much liquor, are we dumb, without power of speech like drunken men, but through the influence of a spirit that sits in the corner yonder in the form of a child." Forthwith the king commanded the squire to fetch him, and he went to the nook where Taliesin sat, and brought him before the king, who asked him what he was, and whence he came. And he answered the king in verse: Primary chief bard am I to Elfin. And my original country is the region of the summer stars. Idno and Hainan called me Murden. At length every king will call me Taliesin. I was with my lord in the highest sphere. On the fall of Lucifer into the depth of hell, I have borne a banner before Alexander. I know the names of the stars from north to south. I have been on the galaxy at the throne of the distributor. I was in Canaan when Absalom was slain. I conveyed the divine spirit to the level of the Vale of Hebron. I was in the court of dawn before the birth of Gwydion. I was instructor to Eli and Enoch. I have been winged by the genius of the splendid Crozier. I have been loquacious prior to being gifted with speech. I was at the place of the crucifixion of the merciful Son of God. I have been 3 periods in the prison of Arianrod. I have been the chief director of the work of the Tower of Nimrod. I am a wonder whose origin is not known. I have been in Asia with Noah in the ark. I have seen the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. I have been in India when Roma was built. I am now come here to the remnant of Troya. I have been with my Lord in the manger of the ass. I strengthened Moses through the water of Jordan. I have been in the firmament with Mary Magdalene. I have obtained the muse from the cauldron of Caradwin. I have been bard of the harp to Leon of Lachlan. I have been on the White Hill in the court of Sinvelin. For a day and a year in stocks and fetters. I have suffered hunger for the son of the Virgin. I have been fostered in the land of the deity. I have been teacher to all intelligences. I am able to instruct the whole universe. I shall be until the day of doom on the face of the earth. And it is not known whether my body is flesh or fish. Then I was for 9 months. In the womb of the hag Caradwin. I was originally Lil Guan. And at length I am Taliesin. And when the king and his nobles had heard the song, they wondered much, for they had never heard the like from a boy as young as he. 40. The larger portion of the bard's song is devoted to the imperishable, which lives in him, only a brief stanza to the details of his personal biography. Those listening are oriented to the imperishable in themselves, and then supplied incidentally with an item of information. Though he had feared the terrible hag, he had been swallowed and reborn. Having died to his personal ego, he arose again established in the self. The hero is the champion of things becoming, not of things become, because he is. Before Abraham was, I am. 41. He does not mistake apparent changelessness in time for the permanence of being, nor is he fearful of the next moment, or of the other thing, as destroying the permanent with its change. Nothing retains its own form, but nature, the greater renewer, ever makes up forms from forms. Be sure there's nothing perishes in the whole universe, it does but vary and renew its form. 42. Thus the next moment is permitted to come to pass. When the Prince of Eternity kissed the Princess of the World, her resistance was allayed. She opened her eyes, awoke, and looked at him in friendship. Together they came down the stairs, and the king awoke and the queen and the entire courtly estate, and all looked at each other with big eyes. And the horses in the court stood up and shook themselves, the hunting dogs jumped and wagged their tails, the pigeons on the roof drew their little heads out from under their wings, looked around, and flew across the field. The flies on the wall walked again. The fire in the kitchen brightened, flickered, and cooked the dinner. The roast began again to sizzle, and the cook gave the scullery boy a box in the ear that made him yell, and the maid finished plucking the chicken. 43. Footnotes. Asterisk. This detail is a rationalization of rebirth from the hermaphroditic initiating father. Asterisk. In many myths of the hero in the whale's belly he is rescued by birds that peck open the side of his prison. Asterisk. Compare the Christian credo. He descended into hell, the 3rd day he rose again from the dead. Asterisk. For you wist not what to say, for they were sore afraid. Gospel according to Mark 9-6. Asterisk. The principal text of modern Hindu devotional religiosity, an ethical dialogue of 18 chapters, appearing in Book 6 of the Mahabharata, which is the Indian counterpart of the Iliad. Asterisk. Jainism is a heterodox Hindu religion, i.e., rejecting the authority of the Vedas, which in its iconography reveals certain extraordinarily archaic traits. For Campbell's further thoughts on Jainism and the Cosmic Woman, see Campbell's Myths of Light, Novato, California. New World Library, pp. 93-101. Ed. Murden equals Merlin, chief wizard of the Arthurian romances. Ed. Endnotes. 1. Vishnu Purana, 23. Bhagavata Purana, 1051. Haravansha, 114. The above is based on the rendering by Heinrich Zimmer, Maya, Der Indische Mythos, Stuttgart and Berlin, 1936, pp. 89-99. Compare with Kurzna, as the world magician, the African Edshu. Compare, also, the Polynesian trickster, Maui. 2. Taliesin, translated by Lady Charlotte Guest in the Mabinogion, Everyman's Library, No. 97, pp. 263-64. 3. See Gertrude Schoperl, Tristan and Isolde, A Study of the Sources of the Romance, London and Frankfurt am Main, 1913. 4. Harva, Op. Cit. pp. 543-44. Quoting, Prvi Briatsi Saman Morgan Kara, Izvestia Vostokno Sibirskego Oddela Ruskego Geografiskego Obsedva, 11, 1-2, Irkutska, 1880, pp. 87 ff. 5. John White, The Ancient History of the Maori, His Mythology and Traditions, Wellington, 1886-89, Volume 2, pp. 167-71. 6. Grimm's Fairy Tales, number 79. 7. C. G. Jung, The Integration of the Personality, New York, 1939, page 59. 8. C. Apollonios of Rhodes, Argonautica. The Flight is recounted in Book 4. 9. Koji Ki, Records of Ancient Matters, A. D. 712, adapted from the translation by C. H. Chamberlain, Transactions of the Asiatic Society of Japan, Volume X, Supplement, Yokohama, 1882, pp. 24-28. 10. Jaiminiya Upanishad Brahmana, 3.28.5. 11. Frobenius, Das Zeitalter des Sonnengottes, pp. 85-87. 12. Tomobi no Yasutaka, Shinto Shoden Kuju. 13. Shinto Gobusho. 14. Izawa Nagahide, Shinto Ameno Nuboko no Ki. 15. Ichija Kateyoshi Nihonshoki Sanso. 16. Urabe no Kanikuni. 17. All of the quotations above will be found in Genshi Kato, What is Shinto? Tokyo, Maruzen Company Limited, 1935. See also Lafcadio Hearn, Japan, An Attempt at Interpretation, New York. Grosset and Dunlap, 1904. 18. Koji Ki, After Chamberlain, Op. Cit. pp. 52-59. 19. Kramer, Op. Cit. pp. 87-95. The conclusion of the poem, this valuable document of the sources of the myths and the symbols of our civilization, is forever lost. 20. Gospel according to Matthew, 26-51. Gospel according to Mark, 1447. Gospel according to John, 1810. 21. Mandukya Upanishad, 5. 22. Washington Irving, The Sketchbook, Rip Van Winkle. 23. Book of Genesis, 5. 24. Curtin, Op. Cit. pp. 332-33. 25. From Sir James G. Fraser, The Golden Bough, 1-volume edition, pp. 593-94. Copyright 1922 by the Macmillan Company and used with their permission. 26. Ibid. pp. 594-95. By permission of the Macmillan Company, publishers. 27. Adapted from Burton, Op. Cit. 3, pp. 231-56. 28. Gospel according to Matthew, 17, 1-9. 29. A certain element of comic relief can be felt in Peter's immediate project, announced even while the vision was before his eyes, to convert the ineffable into a stone foundation. Only 6 days before, Jesus had said to him, Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Then a moment later, Thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. Matthew 16:18-23. 30. Bhagavad Gita, 11, 145-46, 2-9. From the translation by Swami Nikhilananda, New York, 1944. 31. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 1.1.1. Translated by Swami Madhavananda, Mayavati, 1934. 32. Robinson Jeffers, Cawdor, page 116. Copyright 1928 by Robinson Jeffers. Reprinted by permission of Random House, Inc. 33. Summa contra Gentiles, I, 5, par. 3. 34. Kena Upanishad, 2-3. 35. Bhagavad Gita, 11, 53-55. 36. Gospel according to Matthew, 16:25. 37. Shankaracharya, Vivekachudamani, 542 and 555. 38. Bhagavad Gita, 2, 22-24. 39. Ibid, 319 and 330. 40. Taliesin, Op. Cit. pp. 264-74. 41. Gospel according to John, 8:58. 42. Ovid, Metamorphoses, 15, 252-55. 43. Grimm's Fairy Tales, number 50, Little Briar Rose, better known as Sleeping Beauty, conclusion. Chapter IV. The Keys. The adventure can be summarized in this diagram. The mythological hero, setting forth from his common-day hut or castle, is lured, carried away, or else voluntarily proceeds, to the threshold of adventure. There he encounters a shadow presence that guards the passage. The hero may defeat or conciliate this power and go alive into the kingdom of the dark, brother battle, dragon battle, offering, charm, or be slain by the opponent and descend in death, dismemberment, crucifixion. Beyond the threshold, then, the hero journeys through a world of unfamiliar yet strangely intimate forces, some of which severely threaten him, tests, some of which give magical aid, helpers. When he arrives at the nadir of the mythological round, he undergoes a supreme ordeal and gains his reward. The triumph may be represented as the hero's sexual union with the goddess mother of the world, sacred marriage, his recognition by the Father Creator, Father Atonement, his own divinization, apotheosis, or again, if the powers have remained unfriendly to him. His theft of the boon he came to gain, bride theft, fire theft. Intrinsically it is an expansion of consciousness and their way of being, illumination, transfiguration, freedom. The final work is that of the return. If the powers have blessed the hero, he now sets forth under their protection, emissary. If not, he flees and is pursued, transformation flight, obstacle flight. At the return threshold the transcendental powers must remain behind. The hero re-emerges from the kingdom of dread, return, resurrection. The boon that he brings restores the world, elixir. The changes rung on the simple scale of the monomyth defy description. Many tales isolate and greatly enlarge upon one or two of the typical elements of the full cycle, test motif, flight motif, abduction of the bride. Others string a number of independent cycles into a single series, as in the Odyssey. Differing characters or episodes can become fused, or a single element can reduplicate itself and reappear under many changes. The outlines of myths and tales are subject to damage and obscuration. Archaic traits are generally eliminated or subdued. Imported materials are revised to fit local landscape, custom, or belief, and always suffer in the process. Furthermore, in the innumerable retellings of a traditional story, accidental or intentional dislocations are inevitable. To account for elements that have become, for one reason or another, meaningless, secondary interpretations are invented, often with considerable skill. 1. In the Eskimo story of Raven in the Belly of the Whale, the motif of the fire sticks has suffered a dislocation and subsequent rationalization. The archetype of the hero in the Belly of the Whale is widely known. The principal deed of the adventurer is usually to make fire with his fire sticks in the interior of the monster, thus bringing about the whale's death and his own release. Fire making in this manner is symbolic of the sex act. The two sticks, socket stick and spindle, are known respectively as the female and the male. The flame is the newly generated life. The hero making fire in the whale is a variant of the sacred marriage. But in our Eskimo story this fire-making image underwent a modification. The female principle was personified in the beautiful girl whom Raven encountered in the great room within the animal. Meanwhile the conjunction of male and female was symbolized separately in the flow of the oil from the pipe into the burning lamp. Raven's tasting of this oil was his participation in the act. The resultant cataclysm represented the typical crisis of the nadir, the termination of the old eon and initiation of the new. Raven's emergence then symbolized the miracle of rebirth. Thus, the original fire sticks having become superfluous, a clever and amusing epilogue was invented to give them a function in the plot. Having left the fire sticks in the belly of the whale, Raven was able to interpret their rediscovery as an ill-luck omen, frighten the people away, and enjoy the blubber feast alone. This epilogue is an excellent example of secondary elaboration. It plays on the trickster character of the hero but is not an element of the basic story. In the later stages of many mythologies, the key images hide like needles in great haystacks of secondary anecdote and rationalization. For when a civilization has passed from a mythological to a secular point of view, the older images are no longer felt or quite approved. In Hellenistic Greece and in Imperial Rome, the ancient gods were reduced to mere civic patrons, household pets, and literary favorites. Uncomprehended inherited themes, such as that of the Minotaur, the dark and terrible night aspect of an old Egypto-Cretan representation of the incarnate sun god and divine king, were rationalized and reinterpreted to suit contemporary ends. Mount Olympus became a riviera of trite scandals and affairs, and the mother goddesses hysterical nymphs. The myths were read as superhuman romances. In China, comparably, where the humanistic, moralizing force of Confucianism has fairly emptied the old myth forms of their primal grandeur, the official mythology is today a clutter of anecdotes about the sons and daughters of provincial officials, who, for serving their community one way or another, were elevated by their grateful beneficiaries to the dignity of local gods. And in modern progressive Christianity the Christ, incarnation of the Logos and Redeemer of the world, is primarily a historical personage, a harmless country wise man of the semi-oriental past who preached a benign doctrine of do as you would be done by, yet was executed as a criminal. His death is read as a splendid lesson in integrity and fortitude. Wherever the poetry of myth is interpreted as biography, history, or science, it is killed. The living images become only remote facts of a distant time or sky. Furthermore, it is never difficult to demonstrate that as science and history mythology is absurd. When a civilization begins to reinterpret its mythology in this way, the life goes out of it, temples become museums, and the link between the two perspectives is dissolved. Such a blight has certainly descended on the Bible and on a great part of the Christian cult. To bring the images back to life, one has to seek, not interesting applications to modern affairs, but illuminating hints from the inspired past. When these are found, vast areas of half-dead iconography disclose again their permanently human meaning. On Holy Saturday in the Catholic Church, for example, after the blessing of the new fire, the blessing of the Paschal candle, and the reading of the prophecies, the priest puts on a purple cope and, preceded by the processional cross, the candelabra, and the lighted blessed candle, goes to the baptismal font with his ministers and the clergy, while the following tract is sung. As the heart panteth after the fountains of water, so my soul panteth after thee, O God. When shall I come and appear before the face of God? My tears have been my bread day and night, while they say to me daily, where is thy God? 2. On arriving at the threshold of the baptistry, The priest pauses to offer up a prayer, then enters and blesses the water of the font, to the end that a heavenly offspring, conceived by sanctification, may emerge from the immaculate womb of the divine font, reborn new creatures, and that all, however distinguished either by sex and body, or by age and time, may be brought forth to the same infancy by grace, their spiritual mother. He touches the water with his hand, and prays that it may be cleansed of the malice of Satan, makes the sign of the cross over the water, divides the water with his hand and throws some towards the four quarters of the world, breathes thrice upon the water in the form of a cross, then dips the paschal candle in the water and intones, "May the virtue of the Holy Ghost descend into all the water of this font." He withdraws the candle, sinks it back again to a greater depth, and repeats in a higher tone, "May the virtue of the Holy Ghost descend into all the water of this font." Again he withdraws the candle, and for the third time sinks it to the bottom, repeating in a higher tone still, "May the virtue of the Holy Ghost descend into all the water of this font." Then breathing thrice upon the water he goes on, "And make the whole substance of this water fruitful for regeneration." He then withdraws the candle from the water, and, after a few concluding prayers, the assistant priests sprinkle the people with this blessed water. 3. Figure 54. The Fountain of Life, paint on wood, Flanders, circa A.D. 1520. The female water spiritually fructified with the male fire of the Holy Ghost is the Christian counterpart of the water of transformation known to all systems of mythological imagery. This rite is a variant of the sacred marriage, which is the source moment that generates and regenerates the world and man, precisely the mystery symbolized by the Hindu lingam yoni. To enter into this font is to plunge into the mythological realm, to break the surface is to cross the threshold into the night sea. Symbolically, the infant makes the journey when the water is poured on its head. Its guide and helpers are the priest and godparents. Its goal is a visit with the parents of its eternal self, the Spirit of God and the womb of grace. 4. Then it is returned to the parents of the physical body. Few of us have any inkling of the sense of the rite of baptism, which was our initiation into our church. Nevertheless, it clearly appears in the words of Jesus, "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." Nicodemus said to him, "How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb and be born?" Jesus answered, "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God." 5. The popular interpretation of baptism is that it washes away original sin, with emphasis rather on the cleansing than on the rebirth idea. This is a secondary interpretation. Or if the traditional birth image is remembered, nothing is said of an antecedent marriage. Mythological symbols, however, have to be followed through all their implications before they open out the full system of correspondences through which they represent, by analogy, the millennial adventure of the soul. Footnotes. * Holy Saturday, the day between the death and resurrection of Jesus, who is in the belly of hell. The moment of the renewal of the eon. Compare the motif of the fire sticks discussed above. Endnotes. 1. For a discussion of this matter, see my commentary to the Pantheon Books edition of Grimm's Fairy Tales, New York, 1944, pp. 846-56. This commentary is also available as part of Campbell's collection of essays, The Flight of the Wild Gander, pp. 1-19. Ed. 2. Psalm XLI, 2-4, Douay. 3. See the Catholic Daily Missal under Holy Saturday. The above is abridged from the English translation by Dom Gaspard Lefebvre, OSB, published in this country by the E. M. Lohman Company, St. Paul, MN. At the time of the original publication of this volume, of course, the Catholic Mass would have been entirely spoken and sung in Latin. Ed. 4. In India the power, Sakti, of a god is personified in female form and represented as his consort. In the present ritual, grace is similarly symbolized. 5. Gospel according to John, 3, 3-5. Part E. The Cosmogonic Cycle. Figure 55. The Aztec Sun Stone, carved stone, Aztec, Mexico, A.D. 1479. Chapter IEMA Nations 1. From Psychology to Metaphysics. It is not difficult for the modern intellectual to concede that the symbolism of mythology has a psychological significance. Particularly after the work of the psychoanalyst, there can be little doubt, either that myths are of the nature of dream, or that dreams are symptomatic of the dynamics of the psyche. Sigmund Freud, Carl G. Jung, Wilhelm Steckel, Otto Rank, Karl Abraham, Geza Roheim, and many others have within the past few decades developed a vastly documented modern lore of dream and myth interpretation, and though the doctors differ among themselves, they are united into one great modern movement by a considerable body of common principles. With their discovery that the patterns and logic of fairy tale and myth correspond to those of dream, the long discredited chimeras of archaic man have returned dramatically to the foreground of modern consciousness. According to this view, it appears that through the wonder tales, which pretend to describe the lives of the legendary heroes, the powers of the divinities of nature, the spirits of the dead, and the totem ancestors of the group, symbolic expression is given to the unconscious desires, fears, and tensions that underlie the conscious patterns of human behavior. Mythology, in other words, is psychology misread as biography, history, and cosmology. The modern psychologist can translate it back to its proper denotations and thus rescue for the contemporary world a rich and eloquent document of the profoundest depths of human character. Exhibited here, as in a fluoroscope, Stand revealed the hidden processes of the enigma Homo sapiens, Occidental and Oriental, primitive and civilized, contemporary and archaic. The entire spectacle is before us. We have only to read it, study its constant patterns, analyze its variations, and therewith come to an understanding of the deep forces that have shaped man's destiny and must continue to determine both our private and our public lives. But if we are to grasp the full value of the materials, we must note that myths are not exactly comparable to dream. Their figures originate from the same sources, the unconscious wells of fantasy, and their grammar is the same, but they are not the spontaneous products of sleep. On the contrary, their patterns are consciously controlled, and their understood function is to serve as a powerful picture language for the communication of traditional wisdom. This is true already of the so-called primitive folk mythologies. The trance-susceptible shaman and the initiated antelope priest are not unsophisticated in the wisdom of the world, nor unskilled in the principles of communication by analogy. The metaphors by which they live, and through which they operate, have been brooded upon, searched, and discussed for centuries, even millennia. They have served whole societies, furthermore, as the mainstays of thought and life. The culture patterns have been shaped to them. The youth have been educated, and the aged rendered wise, through the study, experience, and understanding of their effective initiatory forms. For they actually touch and bring into play the vital energies of the whole human psyche. They link the unconscious to the fields of practical action, not irrationally, in the manner of a neurotic projection, but in such fashion as to permit a mature and sobering, practical comprehension of the fact world to play back, as a stern control, into the realms of infantile wish and fear. And if this be true of the comparatively simple folk mythologies, the systems of myth and ritual by which the primitive hunting and fishing tribes support themselves, what may we say of such magnificent cosmic metaphors as those reflected in the great Homeric epics, the Divine Comedy of Dante, the Book of Genesis, and the timeless temples of the Orient? Until the most recent decades, these were the support of all human life and the inspiration of philosophy, poetry, and the arts. Where the inherited symbols have been touched by a Lao Tzu, Buddha, Zoroaster, Christ, or Muhammad, employed by a consummate master of the spirit as a vehicle of the profoundest moral and metaphysical instruction, obviously we are in the presence rather of immense consciousness than of darkness. And so, to grasp the full value of the mythological figures that have come down to us, we must understand that they are not only symptoms of the unconscious, as indeed are all human thoughts and acts, but also controlled and intended statements of certain spiritual principles, which have remained as constant throughout the course of human history as the form and nervous structure of the human physique itself. Briefly formulated, the universal doctrine teaches that all the visible structures of the world, all things and beings, are the effects of a ubiquitous power out of which they rise, which supports and fills them during the period of their manifestation, and back into which they must ultimately dissolve. This is the power known to science as energy, to the Melanesians as mana, to the Sioux Indians as Wakanda, the Hindus as Sakti, and the Christians as the power of God. Its manifestation in the psyche is termed, by the psychoanalyst, libido. 1. And its manifestation in the cosmos is the structure and flux of the universe itself. The recognition of the secondary nature of the personality of whatever deity is worshipped is characteristic of most of the traditions of the world. See, for example, page 155, note 154. In Christianity, Mohammedanism, and Judaism, however, the personality of the divinity is taught to be final, which makes it comparatively difficult for the members of these communions to understand how one may go beyond the limitations of their own anthropomorphic divinity. The result has been, on the one hand, a general obfuscation of the symbols, and on the other, a God-ridden bigotry such as is unmatched elsewhere in the history of religion. For a discussion of the possible origin of this aberration, see Sigmund Freud's Moses and Monotheism. 3. The apprehension of the source of this indifferentiated yet everywhere particularized substratum of being is rendered frustrate by the very organs through which the apprehension must be accomplished. The forms of sensibility and the categories of human thought, too, which are themselves manifestations of this power, so confine the mind that it is normally impossible not only to see, but even to conceive, beyond the colorful, fluid, infinitely various and bewildering phenomenal spectacle. The function of ritual and myth is to make possible, and then to facilitate, the jump, by analogy. Forms and conceptions that the mind and its senses can comprehend are presented and arranged in such a way as to suggest a truth or openness beyond. And then, the conditions for meditation having been provided, the individual is left alone. Myth is but the penultimate. The ultimate is openness, that void, or being, beyond the categories which are themselves manifestations of this power, into which the mind must plunge alone and be dissolved. Therefore, God and the gods are only convenient means, themselves of the nature of the world of names and forms, though eloquent of, and ultimately conducive to, the ineffable. They are mere symbols to move and awaken the mind, and to call it past themselves. Heaven, hell, the mythological age, Olympus and all the other habitations of the gods are interpreted by psychoanalysis as symbols of the unconscious. The key to the modern systems of psychological interpretation, therefore, is this: the metaphysical realm equals the unconscious. Correspondingly, the key to open the door the other way is the same equation in reverse: the unconscious equals the metaphysical realm. For, as Jesus states it, behold, the kingdom of God is within you. 4. Indeed, the lapse of superconsciousness into the state of unconsciousness is precisely the meaning of the biblical image of the fall. The constriction of consciousness, to which we owe the fact that we see not the source of the universal power but only the phenomenal forms reflected from that power, turns superconsciousness into unconsciousness and, at the same instant and by the same token, creates the world. Redemption consists in the return to superconsciousness and therewith the dissolution of the world. This is the great theme and formula of the cosmogonic cycle, the mythical image of the world's coming to manifestation and subsequent return into the non-manifest condition. Equally, the birth, life, and death of the individual may be regarded as a descent into unconsciousness and return. The hero is the one who, while still alive, knows and represents the claims of the superconsciousness which throughout creation is more or less unconscious. The adventure of the hero represents the moment in his life when he achieved illumination, the nuclear moment when, while still alive, he found and opened the road to the light beyond the dark walls of our living death. And so it is that the cosmic symbols are presented in a spirit of thought-bewildering sublime paradox. The kingdom of God is within, yet without, also. God, however, is but a convenient means to wake the sleeping princess, the soul. Life is her sleep, death the awakening. The hero, the waker of his own soul, is himself but the convenient means of his own dissolution. God, the waker of the soul, is therewith his own immediate death. Perhaps the most eloquent possible symbol of this mystery is that of the God crucified, the God offered, himself to himself. 5. Read in one direction, the meaning is the passage of the phenomenal hero into superconsciousness. The body with its 5 senses, like that of Prince 5 weapons stuck to sticky hair, is left hanging to the cross of the knowledge of life and death, pinned in 5 places. The 2 hands, the 2 feet, and the head crowned with thorns. 6. But also, God has descended voluntarily and taken upon himself this phenomenal agony. God assumes the life of man and man releases the God within himself at the midpoint of the cross arms of the same coincidence of opposites. 7. The same sun door through which God descends and man ascends. Each as the other's food. 8. The modern student may, of course, study these symbols as he will, either as a symptom of others' ignorance, or as a sign to him of his own, either in terms of a reduction of metaphysics to psychology, or vice versa. The traditional way was to meditate on the symbols in both senses. In any case, they are telling metaphors of the destiny of man, man's hope, man's faith, and man's dark mystery. 2. The universal round. As the consciousness of the individual rests on a sea of night into which it descends in slumber and out of which it mysteriously wakes, so, in the imagery of myth, the universe is precipitated out of, and reposes upon, a timelessness back into which it again dissolves. And as the mental and physical health of the individual depends on an orderly flow of vital forces into the field of waking day from the unconscious dark, so again in myth, the continuance of the cosmic order is assured only by a controlled flow of power from the source. The gods are symbolic personifications of the laws governing this flow. The gods come into existence with the dawn of the world and dissolve with the twilight. They are not eternal in the sense that the night is eternal. Only from the shorter span of human existence does the round of a cosmogonic eon seem to endure. The cosmogonic cycle is normally represented as repeating itself, world without end. During each great round, lesser dissolutions are commonly included, as the cycle of sleep and waking revolves throughout a lifetime. According to an Aztec version, each of the 4 elements, water, earth, air, and fire, terminates a period of the world. The eon of the waters ended in deluge, that of the earth with an earthquake, that of air with a wind, and the present eon will be destroyed by flame. 9. According to the Stoic doctrine of the cyclic conflagration, all souls are resolved into the world soul or primal fire. When this universal dissolution is concluded, the formation of a new universe begins, Cicero's Renovatio, and all things repeat themselves, every divinity, every person, playing again his former part. Seneca gave a description of this destruction in his De Consolatione ad Marcium, and appears to have looked forward to living again in the cycle to come. 10. A magnificent vision of the cosmogonic round is presented in the mythology of the Jains. The most recent prophet and savior of this very ancient Indian sect was Mahavira, a contemporary of the Buddha, 6th century B.C. His parents were already followers of a much earlier Jaina savior prophet, Parsvanatha, who is represented with snakes springing from his shoulders and is reputed to have flourished 872 to 772 B.C. Centuries before Parsvanatha, there lived and died the Jaina savior Naminatha, declared to have been a cousin of the beloved Hindu incarnation Krishna. And before him, again, were exactly 21 others, going all the way back to Arsabhanatha, who existed in an earlier age of the world, when men and women were always born in wedded couples, were 2 miles tall, and lived for a period of countless years. Arsabhanatha instructed the people in the 72 sciences, writing, arithmetic, reading of omens, etc., the 64 accomplishments of women, cooking, sewing, etc., and the 100 arts, pottery, weaving, painting, smithing, barbering,